If children grow up not knowing about nature, they will not understand it. And if they don't understand it, they won't protect it. And if they don't protect it, who will? This talk celebrates the power of islands as drivers for biodiversity, evolution and innovation. Islands are critical centres of biodiversity. Our islands are no exception. Sharing knowledge of nature and making nature accessible to all is essential. Islands do not exist in isolation. Wildlife is transitory, and biodiversity loss is a global challenge. We need to inspire action. It took Guernsey just 18 years to erase 63% of our natural habitats. This cannot be allowed to continue. Our work tells stories of wildlife in islands. We explore the critical habitats, ecosystems and species that thrive in islands. From highlighting marine projects in Guernsey to filming sperm whales in the Azores, we see film and storytelling as a crucial part of the rewilding puzzle. So today, we will highlight to you just how important and fragile islands can be and how we can feed into the global ambition for a nature-positive future. So, why are wild islands so important? Well, there are over 600,000 islands in the world, yet only around 11,000 are inhabited. This means that there are hundreds of thousands of islands across the globe for wildlife to thrive, even amongst those that are inhabited, even amongst our own. On islands, we find unique habitats and species found nowhere else on the planet. Let's take our own islands. In Alderney, we have nesting grounds for large gannet colonies and other breeding seabirds. In Guernsey and Herm, we have eelgrass beds, described by Project Seagrass as some of the richest, densest beds in the British Isles. In Belgrave Bay alone, we have 3 habitat-forming species: kelp, merle and eelgrass. Throughout our waters we find dolphins, sharks and rays. Even, on occasion, if you're lucky enough, you might see whales passing through. John Ovenden spotted 2 humpback whales in 2023 off the coast of Sark. Developed or not, islands matter. All living organisms and ecosystems exist in a delicate balance necessary for life on planet Earth to thrive in an intricate web of life. This is biodiversity. Biodiversity encompasses the staggering variety of life forms and genetic diversity present in different ecosystems on Earth. The significance of biodiversity can be understood through several key points. Ecosystem stability. Biodiverse ecosystems tend to be more stable and resilient to environmental changes. Ecosystem services. Biodiversity provides essential ecosystem services that support human well-being. Genetic resources. Biodiversity represents a vast repository of genetic resources that can be utilised for various purposes, including including medicine, agriculture, and biotechnology. Cultural. It enriches our lives through recreation, tourism, art, and spiritual practices. Many cultures have deep connections with specific species or ecosystems, and the loss of biodiversity can have profound, negative cultural impacts. This diversity is crucial for maintaining the balance and stability of ecosystems and is essential for the health and well-being of all life on our planet. Here we can see the drivers of biodiversity loss, habitat degradation being by far the largest cause. To quote Gerald Durrell, "The world is as delicate and as complicated as a spider's web. If you touch one thread, you send shudders running through all the other threads. We are not just touching the web, we are tearing great holes in it." Like a woven tapestry, every organism, from the smallest microbe to the largest mammal, plays a crucial role in maintaining the balance and health of the environment. Each species relies on others for survival. These complex relationships of dependence and interdependence have existed for millennia and are a vital indicator of environmental changes. Islands serve as remarkable centres of biodiversity, harbouring an extraordinary array of unique species adapted to their isolated environments. Over millions of years, evolutionary processes have led to the emergence of distinct flora, that's plants, and fauna, that's animals, on islands. This extraordinary array of unique species, specifically adapted to these restricted environments, are known as endemic species and occur naturally nowhere else on Earth. These isolated ecosystems provide fertile ground for speciation, with new species evolving to fill ecological niches in the absence of competition from mainland counterparts. This renders islands highly vulnerable. Sudden changes can have devastating consequences. One of the most famous examples of human-caused extinction, taking just 80 years to wipe out millions of years of evolution, is the sad tale of the dodo. Evolving in isolation on Mauritius, dodo had no natural predators. Being flightless, they were easy to hunt for food when Mauritius was colonised by the Dutch in 1638. Humans brought new competitors to the island, including pigs, cats, and rats. Together with humans, these animals ate the dodo's eggs and their young until the dodo was no more. A manufactured extinction is the commercial cultivation of vanilla. The vanilla orchid evolved in Mexico, where its flowers are pollinated by the vanilla bee. However, we grow 80% of the world's vanilla in Madagascar. The cultivators must pollinate each orchid by hand. The result? Vanilla is more expensive than silver and is only becoming more expensive as our demand for this spice increases. Imagine the economic cost if pollinators for other crops become extinct. These are two clear examples of the threats we pose to biodiversity. Our islands can be easily changed by us, but they can also adapt quickly, offering great potential for environmental protection in line with our culture and values. Take Jersey's marine park plans to protect 30% of their territorial waters. This type of proactive action to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030 is an example of islands leading the way. Talking about unique island species, Guernsey has its own, the Guernsey vole. Guernsey voles are a subspecies of the common vole, which is adapted to the unique habitat and conditions on our islands. Our voles have island syndrome. They are significantly larger than both their European and British counterparts. Naturalised species are not native. Instead, they have been introduced and established self-sustaining wild populations. They become part of the local ecosystem. A local example of a naturalised species is the green lizard, believed to have been introduced from Jersey in the 1800s, although it is possible that we have our own endemic population. So, I've talked about natural and naturalised species, but there's also the threat of invasive species. Invasive species are plants or animals that harm regional ecosystems. They do not exist in balance. We should all be familiar with the Asian hornet. The first known sighting in Guernsey was in 2017. Guernsey adopted a proactive, cost-efficient approach of eradication to prevent this species becoming established, in contrast to Jersey, which has now a real problem with Asian hornets. The Bailiwick of Guernsey has the potential to be a paradise for wildlife. Our unique geographic position makes us the perfect place for migratory bird species to nest and breed. Around our islands are dozens of rocky islets that create ideal nesting grounds for seabirds, from puffins to guillemots. From Alderney, you can literally take a front row seat to marvel at one of the most impressive birds, gannets. Every year in February, around 6,000 pairs of gannets start to arrive on the islets around Alderney. They crowd over these islets. Throughout their breeding season, they can be seen hunting all around the islands, foraging across the bailiwick. There is real joy in being able to see their fluffy young. These birds are highly vulnerable. Fishing twine, rope, and ocean plastics are indistinguishable from seaweed, sticks, and other natural materials they would historically use to create nests. Close by, on Baru and around Herm, puffins return each year. These small but mighty birds also journey to our islands to breed. Between our islands and far offshore, pods of dolphins, large and small, circulate in search of food. In 2021, Ed Staffen spotted a pod of bottlenose dolphins corralling a shoal of gilt-head bream into a large bait ball off the coast of Alderney. The diversity of life in our waters is truly staggering. Terpsios truncatus. The bottlenose dolphin. From recent studies, we know they are mostly sighted in the Little Russell. And around Herm. Bottlenose dolphins can be spotted launching themselves into the air from the large rolling wake from bigger boats. They do this for the same reasons humans would if they could swim at 25 miles an hour. 'Cause it's fun. These incredibly curious and playful mammals love to play in the bow wake of smaller boats. As you're staring at them trying to figure them out, they're doing exactly the same. Just like humans, the young are often the most curious and fearless. Here you can see a juvenile swimming up to the research boat and investigating before swimming off to rejoin their pod. Dolphins live mainly in matriarchal groups. The grandmothers, mothers and children will swim closely together, stacked one above the other, with the oldest at the top. The recent increase in dolphin sightings over the last few years led to the creation of the Dolphin Project, dedicated to identifying individual dolphins through the unique shape and scarring on their dorsal fins. Globally, dolphins face many threats from human encroachment, PCBs and industrial runoff, noise pollution and boat strikes. Although our waters offer sanctuary, these are highly mobile creatures, and what happens outside our waters has a direct impact. Marine users have more than just bottlenose dolphins to consider. Risso's dolphins can be found travelling through our waters during the summer months. Found in significantly smaller pods, these slower-moving dolphins have a much rounder face, reminiscent of pilot whales. If you venture just a few nautical miles off our coasts, you may find yourself surrounded by large pods of common dolphins. These close relations of bottlenose dolphins are recognisable by their white bellies and the creamy yellow hourglass shape down the length of their bodies. Common dolphins, much shyer than bottlenose, reside further offshore, where they play in the big rolling swell, hunting large shoals of fish passing by. These dolphins are another example of the many species that rely on the shelter and habitats our islands provide. Between 2000 and 2018, we have seen a 63% decline in natural habitats on our islands. Reversing this decline is essential. But we also have some game-changing initiatives to protect wildlife and wild spaces, and remarkable people leading the way to spark cultural change. The Bailiwick of Guernsey is fortunate to have a number of nature reserves managed by the Ordinary Wildlife Trust, La Société Guernesiaise, Seagrass, and the National Trust, plus 4 Ramsar sites across the Bailiwick. One of these Ramsar sites covers a dense seagrass meadow in Herm. Like kelp and merle, seagrass meadows create an oxygen-rich environment and safe haven for life to flourish.
As seagrass is the only terrestrial plant that has evolved to live in the sea, it has a secret weapon that sets it apart from all other marine plants. Rhizomes. These appear as layers of horizontally travelling stems that lie just below the sandy sea floor. This thick blanket holds in much of the sediment below, keeping the water crystal clear around the seagrass. The locking in of sediment can drastically reduce the effects of coastal erosion too. The Channel Islands have 2 species of seagrass: common eelgrass, Zostera marina, and dwarf eelgrass, Zostera knowlti. The latter is only found on the west coast of Herm and Jetty. In recent years, we have started to understand much more about our eelgrass beds, thanks to research projects taking place across the Channel Islands. Jersey Marine Conservation is assessing the state of their eelgrass beds through a combination of aerial and submarine research. The Bailiwick Eelgrass Exploration Project, or BEEP, is mapping and recording data from eelgrass beds across Alderney, Guernsey and Herm. BEEP is using an effective method of citizen science. Volunteers recording where they see eelgrass and then reporting it to BEEP for the sites to be confirmed and monitored. Even though we have shown you seagrass meadows that are thriving and healthy, they are not all as lucky. There are many threats to this habitat. Setting anchors or lobster pots in seagrass can tear up the beds. When dislodged, sediment is released too, turning crystal clear water into a murky quagmire. Surface runoff of fertilisers can cause large algal blooms on the seagrass blades. Some of these algae smother and suffocate the seagrass, causing partial or complete meadow death. While you can snorkel over seagrass during the day and even walk over the beds on a low spring tide, it's when the sun sets that you see the real magic.
The States of Guernsey recognises the social and economic benefits of wildlife protection, recently publishing the Give Wildlife a Chance Code of Conduct to help us enjoy observing wildlife without causing harm or disturbance to the animals. In Guernsey, we all have immense access to nature and open spaces. Our coastal areas, beaches, nature reserves, cliff paths and parks that are threaded throughout our island. We need to look after these spaces. Creating marine protected areas would be a fast, effective leap in the right direction. At present, we protect 0%. The States of Guernsey 2020 Strategy for Nature included a quote by Paul and Anne Ehrlich. Species are to ecosystems what rivets are to a plane's wing. Losing one might not be a problem, but each loss adds to the likelihood of a disaster. Nature knows no borders. Wildlife, by its very nature, is transitory, continually moving and adapting to changing environments and conditions. Migration is a prime example of this transience, as countless species traverse vast distances in search of food, suitable breeding grounds, or favourable climates. Because wildlife itself moves, it makes it crucial that we protect and improve habitats, not just the species themselves. Providing space for wildlife to thrive, allowing it to stabilise ecosystems. When we improve our coastal habitats, we're not just benefiting our islands, but the ocean as a whole. Our ambition should be far beyond the boundaries of our territorial waters. Vice versa, when pollution is released into the sea, it doesn't stop when it hits our borders. Our island is awash with plastic materials coming from all across the planet. Looking out to the ocean on a clear day, you'd be mistaken for thinking that there's nothing out there. But nothing could be further from reality.
Recent years have seen the return of vast schools of Atlantic bluefin tuna, Thamus thynus. As our oceans warm, fish must adapt and chase the conditions that most suit them, which are slowly running out. Shoals of baitfish move into our waters. When tuna spot these fish, they encircle them. The hunt is on. These incredibly nimble fish have the appearance of torpedoes as they rocket through the water at over 40 miles an hour. They compress the shoal of fish to the highest density they can achieve. The tuna take turns launching themselves across the circle, catching as many baitfish as they can in this short burst. The sea boils in a perfect circle as we look on from above the water. In the 70s, demand and prices for tuna soared worldwide. The commercial fishing industry found new, more effective ways of catching tuna. As a result, tuna populations have declined by 90% since the 1950s. In recent years, international conservation efforts have led to a curb in commercial take. Nevertheless, it is likely that illegal fishing has kept the Atlantic bluefin tuna at the brink of extinction.
To give you a sense of the distances these fish migrate, Atlantic bluefin tuna tagged off Jersey were found to have travelled up to 10,000 kilometres. That's over 6,000 miles. The return of Atlantic bluefin tuna has sparked vigorous debate about whether we should exploit this opportunity. However, without understanding the circumstances and extent of tuna passing through our waters, it's difficult to consider the implications of a commercial fishery. Our work has taken us further afield. As I say, nature knows no borders, and islands everywhere can have an impact. In 2023, we secured a governmental permit to film whales in the Azores. We headed to São Miguel to learn about the remarkable cultural change that has happened there. These islands' economies relied on the gruesome practice of whaling for meat, oil, and other resources. While whaling is unspeakably cruel from a modern perspective, back then it was a matter of survival. There were no other paying jobs in the islands. It's important to recognise the practices of Azorean whalers were different from the factory ships of the Americans. They continued to hunt in their small, wooden boats with handmade weapons, killing only a small number of sperm whales. Counterparts in other countries used modern vessels and sophisticated harpoons, leading to the decimation of many whale species. To address this drastic decline in populations, the International Whaling Commission issued a moratorium on commercial whaling in 1982. The end of whaling in the Azores sparked a remarkable shift. These whales, dolphins, and other cetaceans and their lives are vital to their economy. The Azores is now recognised as one of the best places in the world to see whales. These islands and the animals surrounding them are culturally intertwined. The whales are valued, their intelligence recognised. Our work here was an eye-opening experience. Some of the most vocal supporters for stricter regulations governing the whale watching industry in the Azores come from ex-whalers who are often the tour operators themselves. They know how engine noise affects cetaceans and why sperm whale nursery groups should be protected. These ex-whalers, perhaps more than anyone, know about the vulnerability of whale populations and how falling numbers impact an industry they relied on. This is conservation in action. You can see how quickly people can evolve when circumstances change, and that can be positive and for the better. What sparked our journey was to learn how a society whose whole culture was based on exploitation pivoted to one of the strongest voices in conservation. Their culture is centred around the power of the sea, living in balance with nature, not exploiting it. The impact of seeing these majestic ocean giants cannot be underestimated. Sperm whales may not be the prettiest of the whale family, but they embody intelligence and grandeur. Their matriarchal herds are affectionate, hugging each other with their bodies, babysitting each other's calves, and communicating across long distances. They gracefully glide between our world and the deep ocean. How can they exist to inhabit two worlds? What could make such a remarkable creature? How can we do such damage to our oceans knowing creatures like this exist? They are transformative. Observing wildlife in its natural state makes us see there is a world beyond ourselves. We need to reflect. Nature, the outdoors, isn't a silly, fluffy luxury or to be managed as a trophy for a chosen few, nor should it be a walled-off retreat, but it is an essential thread that should run through all our lives. Nature is for everyone. What do we mean when we say nature positive? Nature Positive by 2030 is a global goal aimed to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030 on a 2020 baseline, achieving a full recovery by 2050. This goal should be delivered through increasing the health, abundance, diversity, and resilience of species, populations, and ecosystems, so that by 2030, nature is visibly and measurably on the path to recovery. This global societal goal is relatable right here in our islands. But if people do not feel nature is for them or accessible, then how will we achieve this recovery? The act of conservation can miss the mark when we designate separate spaces to protect biodiversity and nature, rather than considering it fundamental to our existence. Living Streets initiatives are a great antidote to this. They recognise the place of nature and open spaces in our daily lives. Renaturing urban spaces should benefit all residents, first and foremost, vulnerable neighbourhoods. Unfortunately, the opposite can be the case. The improved amenities result in increased rent, property values, and push out those of lower socioeconomic status. Analyses from the European Centre for Environment and Human Health suggests people are happier when living in urban areas with greater amounts of green space. This is supported by research from the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, which revealed that as a city becomes more economically developed, its citizens' happiness becomes more directly related to the area of urban green space. We must be pragmatic. Guernsey is an urban island. Guernsey needs integrated, affordable development. Integrating nature and green spaces as part of our planning process, rather than a nice-to-have afterthought, is a necessary step for the future. Inspiring action is vital. We know what we need to do. Reversing biodiversity loss can be achieved on a daily basis, whether through individual action or governmental legislation. We have a shared mission to create a nature-positive world. We tell stories of people and wildlife on islands. We have many scientists working tirelessly in the conservation space, but their work is highly technical. Translating their research, data, and findings into an easy-to-understand format requires new language from talented communicators. We tell their stories. Not everyone can get out into nature. Visual storytelling is an accessible way to bring nature into our homes. To bring these stories to life, we need your support. For us, it is clear, in order to turn the ship around, we need to embrace a new way of thinking and framing.